Hello and welcome to Pickleball Therapy, the podcast dedicated to your pickleball improvement. It's the only podcast with you in mind. This is a special episode. This week, we're putting out an interview that I was able to conduct with pickleball pro player Dylan Frazier. Dylan Frazier is a fine young man who is a senior student at the University of Missouri, but he's also one of the top pro pickleball players in the world. And I was able to sit down and chat with Dylan for a few minutes about his journey and also about how he approaches the game and from a mental side as well as from a decision-making side. In other words, the types of shots that he wants to hit. And I think it's going to be really helpful for you to listen to this podcast. A lot to learn from a player who went from 3.5 pickleball all the way to being one of the top pro players in the sport and does not have a tennis background. So if you don't have a tennis background, you're going to really enjoy hearing from Dylan and how he approaches the game. Before we jump into the podcast, a couple of notes. First of all, if you're new to the podcast and have not heard one of our podcasts before, I highly recommend you check out episode 162. It'll give you a really good sense for what types of podcasts you're going to get here at Pickleball Therapy, and also will help you with your game and your perspective and how you approach the game. It's a podcast entitled The Bowl of Ice Cream, published on October 20th. Check that one out. It'll give you a really good primer, if you will, into Pickleball Therapy. And at the end of the podcast, at the end of the interview with Dylan, we talk about the paddle that he currently uses, both for doubles and singles, and it happens to be the same paddle that I use. So if you're interested in checking out more about that paddle, I'll put a link down in the show notes where you can get a Selkirk paddle from our friends over at Selkirk and check out their paddles. And then lastly, before we get into it, last week, we had a special episode where I asked for any phrases that you relate to the podcast. If you still want to get involved with that, please send us any kind of phrase that jumps out to you from the podcast. To give you some idea, some of the phrases that we got were intentionality, get past four, and pickleball is messy. So those are just three of the ones that you wrote in on. You can send us an email at therapy@betterpickleball.com and let us know. Enjoy my interview with Dylan Frazier. Super happy to have top pro player Dylan Frazier with us on the Pickleball Therapy podcast today. Dylan's taking some time out from his busy schedule. He's still a full-time student in addition to being a professional pickleball player, so he's got a lot going on. Dylan, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you on here. Dylan, there are some folks who listen to the podcast who may not be familiar with your story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into pickleball? I know your mom introduced you to it, but just give us a little bit of that story, how you got into pickleball.
Yeah, so my mom, like you said, introduced me to the sport. She had actually played while she was attending the University of Missouri, just recreationally for fun. And then we were visiting my grandparents in Florida one year, and we were looking for something to do, and they suggested that we go to the rec center and play pickleball there, so we did. And I think like a lot of people, we fell in love with it right away, kind of got the bug, played one game. It was super easy to learn and be decent at right away. And so we had some competitive games with some of the local Florida players there, and we were hooked right away. So when we came back to Missouri, we found the Show Me Pickleball Club, and which is the club based in Columbia, Missouri, where I live, and started playing with them, and then tournaments eventually, and now we're here.
Awesome. And we're going to get into this a little more in detail as we go through some of your journey. But one of the things that sort of sets you apart from some of the other batch of pro players is you didn't really have, my understanding is you didn't really have like a tennis background coming into pickleball. You played other sports, right? But not, the only racket sport you played was really pickleball with any kind of seriousness, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I played a lot of baseball. Baseball, I'd say, was my primary sport. I did a little bit of basketball and football, but it was mostly baseball. And I played tennis recreationally a few times, with my mom and some other people at a YMCA, maybe a few times, but never competitively, never like on a team. My high school didn't have a tennis team, so I never really got into tennis that much. It was all mostly baseball.
And I think, the reason that we point that out is in part because a lot of pickleball players, as you know, a lot of pickleball players come into pickleball without tennis, and then they see tennis players and say, well, how can I compete with that? And here to tell you, Dylan Frazier's out there battling with tennis players week in and week out at the highest level, and is able to not only hold his own, but win many of the times against them. So that's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about your your improvement journey, right? Because you've been playing pickleball, if I did my math right, roughly around 7 years, starting from rec to where you are now, right?
Yep, correct.
So let's talk a little bit about, that journey for you in terms of like when you decided to take pickleball more seriously, right? Tell us a little bit about what that was like in terms of the work you put in. Are you drilling every week in that time period? And now, and maybe a couple of tips that you can share with players about things that kind of changed your game, right? Where you went from like, I can hold my own, I'm pretty decent out there, to, okay, now I can compete with the best players on the planet.
Yeah, so there were a lot of steps between where I started and where I'm playing now. I started at a 3.5 level. First tournament I played in, I medaled. I got second in singles, but in the doubles didn't get a medal. So I had a long ways to go from where I started. I'd say once I started playing tournaments and really got interested in pursuing that, I started to drill a little bit more, and I also just started to play a little bit more. I was already playing a lot. Even before I started playing tournaments, I was just playing recreationally for fun because I was having so much fun with it. But then once I started or decided that I wanted to play some more tournaments and see how good I can get, then the practices and drill sessions became a little more focused and focused on specific things I was trying to get better at. And so really pouring a lot of time into just getting reps at shots that I needed to develop or be more consistent with. Drilling was the go-to play there. And then from making it to like the 4.0 or really like 4.5 to 5.0 and then 5.0 to pro jump, it was playing against higher level players and getting tournament experience. I would say those were the two biggest things that helped me grow my game. And I've traveled to Wichita earlier on. I haven't as much recently, but early on when I was kind of making that jump from 5.0 to pro, I traveled to Wichita a lot, played with JWs, Matt and Lucy. I stayed at Patrick Smith's house and Chris X there. They've got a great group of players and pros there that I was able to practice with, and that was super helpful for sure. Just kind of seeing what that level was like, what shots worked, what shots didn't work at that level, and then taking what I learned from that, going back home and drilling shots that I needed to work on or be better at. And so yeah, it was a long process, but I'd say the two biggest things that helped were playing high level players and just doing a lot of drilling.
Gotcha. And let me ask you, because you may not remember this, but at one of the tournaments, I kind of chatted you for a minute, and I told you're like, I refer to you a lot in terms of my teaching because of when you dink, you have a very compact, I would say simple, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean it as a compliment, a very simple dink technique. And so your dinks don't really break down. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Colin too. Like Colin has a similar kind of a very simple dink technique, but it works very well. Can you talk a little bit about just generally like the soft game? Because, I think players out there, they see hard balls and they go, well, it's got to be hard. But when I see like you and JW play, when I see Colin and Ben play, the reason I think you all win is because you all are disciplined in the soft game, and then you have counterattacks too. I recognize that. But in terms of the soft game, can you talk a little about the soft game and how you think about it in terms of your play?
Yeah, so the soft game obviously is super important. You see pros at the highest level dinking all the time, back and forth, and really it's just for like JW and myself. I'm sure for Ben and Colin, it's about having confidence in your ability to grind out a dink rally and to be given the first good opportunity to attack. And so not necessarily like the first chance you get to attack is always the ball you want to attack. You got to be confident in your ability to set up to work the point to a spot where you get a good look, a good opportunity to attack and win the point. To your comment on how my dinking motion is a little kind of more compact, a little simple, that's definitely intentional. And it's because you need or in my opinion or my experience, you need something that's easy to replicate, right? You don't want to take this big wide swing every time on your dink. Just keep it simple, keep it compact, something that's easy to replicate, because consistency is, I think, the biggest separator across, teams and really all levels of pickleball, but even at the pro level, just consistency is a huge separator. It's why Ben and Colin have so much success. It's, why all the top teams that are getting on the podium. That's why they have a lot of success, because they can execute shots more consistently than other teams. I wouldn't say that any player on the tour, I mean, with maybe one or two exceptions, has any shot that nobody else can hit. Right? It's not like Ben Johns is out there hitting crazy, insane shots that nobody else can do. Everybody has kind of the same shots that they can hit, but the ones that can do it 9 out of 10 times as opposed to 8 out of 10 times are the ones that are having more success right now, I think.
I love it, Dylan. I'm going to quote you to all of our students from here on out. I'm going to say, hey, don't listen to me. Listen to Dylan. Dylan knows what he's talking about. He's out there winning golds and silvers week in and week out. So, and congratulations, by the way, on the win this last week, the weekend before.
Thank you.
All right, let's pivot a little bit towards the mental side of the game. And you're still a young man and you're still growing as a human being. As I would say, I'm growing too. I'm a little older than you, but we're all growing. But you've come a long way in the sport of pickleball. And let's talk a little bit about how you approach the game when I imagine there's situations out there when, whether it's another player or a fan or whatever, distractions occur or potentially occur. How do you deal with that when you're playing at the highest level of pickleball in terms of staying focused on what's going on the court?
Yeah, so just in terms of like reactions from the crowds or any interactions you might have with someone while you're playing, I would say thankfully I don't notice it a whole lot. Like once I get in the match, I'm pretty focused, and I've had like some friends and family and even just some other fans come up to me after the match and they're like, "Did you hear me cheering for you? Did you hear what I said?" Like I was trying to be loud. I'm like, well, I appreciate that. Thank you for the support, but honestly, I was locked in. I didn't even notice it. And so for me, like once you step onto the court, it's just you, your partner, if you're playing doubles, and the other team, and that's all it is. And I kind of try to have that tunnel vision. Like I'm focused on the game, and that's it. It's like nobody's even there watching, and that definitely has changed throughout the years I've been playing, because when I first started, it was definitely a distraction, having people standing there watching you play. Even when I was like at the 4-5 or 5-0 level, playing in a final, and just having like 10 or 15 people watching the matches, like, okay, I kind of feel a little more pressure now with that many people watching, and so I'd say the biggest thing that helps me kind of overcome that or not be concerned about the distractions outside the court while I'm playing is just experience. Over the course of however many tournaments I've played now, over the course of 7 years, it was a slow and gradual process, but eventually I got to a point where it's doesn't bother me anymore like it used to. I used to get a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious when I was playing in front of a crowd. My first couple of pro tournaments that I was playing in front of a crowd was a little nerve-wracking, but now it's not a problem at all, and it's just because I've done it so often that I don't really think anything of it anymore.
Yeah, repetition is such a powerful tool in everything, including that part of the game. Talk to us a little bit about that, and perhaps it doesn't affect you, but I know sometimes it can affect players when we first start out playing pickleball, we don't really have expectations of ourselves in terms of our performance, our results, and then at some point we start getting expectations because we start winning in our groups. Obviously for you, it's a little bit different because you're playing where you're one of the top, 3, 4, 5, however many, players in the world. And so, talk to us a little bit about how you manage expectations now that, it's not Dylan from 3 years ago or 2 years ago when if you won, it was great. If you didn't win, no big deal. Now, again, there's a little bit more eyes on you and things like that. How do you manage that part of the game?
Yeah, again, I think just experience at having experience, being in this position has helped a lot. And yeah, to begin with, I love playing from an underdog position. Like if I'm not expected to win the match, or I feel like I'm not the favorite going into a match, then usually that's when I play a little bit better. You're a little bit looser because it's like, what do you have to lose? Like if, you lose this match, well, it was expected anyway. So really in that situation, you have nothing to lose. You can kind of play loose and really go for the win. And so that's the situation I like being in the most, I'd say, is kind of the underdog position. But at the same time, once you have established yourself as a top 5 player and the expectations are there that, you're expected to win, you're expected to make it, to a certain round in the tournament, semifinals, finals, whatever. then it should also give you a little bit more confidence, because it's like, hey, people are recognizing that we're winning and making it to this, round consistently. And that, gives you a little bit of confidence too, just knowing that the expectations are higher and that people expect more of you. So I think it's helpful in that sense that, I'm the better team. Like I should be winning. If I play, good pickleball, like I have in the past, or like I'm capable of, then I'm going to win this match, 8 or 9 out of 10 times. And so having that confidence helps a little bit. And then for the most part though, like when you're playing a team that you're expected to win against, just making sure that nothing changes in your game. Like just because it doesn't matter who's on the other side of the net, right? If it's a team that's going to be tough, that might beat you, if it's a team that you're supposed to win against, like in either situation, you're gonna play the same way, and you're gonna play the ball, right? You're not gonna play your opponent. It's sticking to your strengths, not necessarily being concerned with what the other side of the net's doing to some extent. Like to some extent, obviously, different teams have different strengths and weaknesses that you have to be aware of. But for the most part, it's just identifying what your strengths are, and then making sure that you go out and play to those strengths and execute in every single match.
Awesome. Yeah, I think sticking to the plan is so important. And we had the opportunity to speak with Colin, I think it was a couple of years ago now, for our summit. He was on our summit, and his biggest thing was discipline. He was like, you gotta stick to you gotta be disciplined, right? Whatever it is you're doing. And I would say, watching you and JW kind of evolve as a team, because I do watch you guys, and I watch obviously Ben and Colin, and I would even say, like, if you watch, I was going to mention, like, Federico and Pablo, they're good athletes and have great hands, but they didn't really start moving up until they got more disciplined and started saying, okay, we're going to grind. With you guys want to grind, we'll grind too. And then that's when they've had the most success, I think, is that sticking to the plan kind of a thing. So that's awesome. Let me ask you about the partner play, because that's obviously you and JW are, I think, just an amazing team to watch. Your energy is so positive. There's other players who are good players, right? Objectively good pickleball players, excuse me, but they don't seem to have the same kind of rapport that you and JW have. And frankly, you guys look like you're having a great time, which I think is amazing, right? To be able to succeed that way in play. Talk to us a little bit about, like, the partner energy and how you guys feed off of each other. And I'm going to ask you about paddle taps in a second, but let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So for one, I think it's super important to have a partner that you can play a lot of tournaments with. I think if you look at all of the top teams right now in mixed doubles and gender doubles, that it's teams that have had a lot of experience together. And the reason that's helpful, at least in my experience playing with JW, because in mixed doubles I switch it around a lot, but in men's doubles with JW, you're always on the same page. You know what the other one's going to do. You've done it so many times together. Each player kind of takes on a specific role, so that the other teammate knows what the other player is going to do. And then you kind of just develop a rhythm, and you have certain plays and certain spots that you like to target on the court that your partner is aware of. And so just kind of knowing what's going to happen, at least from your side of the net at all times, is super helpful. And it really helps you get into a rhythm, know where to look for the ball. And it's just the little things like that, I think, make a huge difference. And I think it's also important to have for playing with someone that you get along with and that you like as a person, off the court, on and off the court. Because then you want to win for them as much as you want to win for yourself. And so that is important for establishing, good chemistry, a good connection with your partner. For JW and I, we like to try to keep it light on the court. I think, it never hurts for us to, like, they're in a timeout or something, bring up something unrelated to the match that's going on, just something that we encountered off the court or something that we thought was funny, and just trying to keep it light, because it loosens you up a little bit, kind of takes some of that tension and pressure off of you. And then you can, if I can get him to laugh or he can get me to laugh, that's always a good thing, because it means we're loose, we're happy, and we're going to go out there and have a good time and play our best pickleball in that situation. And then, yeah, so I'd say playing with a partner that you enjoy being around on and off the court, and then just having the consistency of playing with the same person for a lot of tournaments.
I got to watch you and JW play in the semifinals at Nationals, and JW's hair was amazing. I told Julie, his mom, I was like, that hair, if he can, And if you could do the same thing with your hair in the back, where you can let it like bedhead in the back, that would look, you guys would come out with that beautiful wave of hair in the back. It looks amazing. I think it's the best hair in pickleball, I think. But anyway. And the other thing I wanted to mention is you guys don't seem to like, you see partners who like, you know, a player misses a shot and the other player either turns away or rolls their eyes or the shoulder slumping, all the things. I've frankly never seen you guys do that. So talk to us a little bit about that, like how you feel. Obviously, you're going to miss shots, and obviously JW is going to miss shots. I mean, there's no way around that. But I've never seen you guys get on each other over that kind of thing, and without naming names, right? I mean, maybe talk about like how you felt playing. Partner again, no names. We don't need names, but you know, playing with a partner who doesn't support you like that, where you know that if somebody attacks you and you miss the backhand counter punch, it's not the end of the world. You know, you'll get another chance.
Yeah, I think it makes a little difference. And again, once you get, you know, to that highest level, anything that makes a little difference, you're definitely willing to do, because it gives you a little bit of an edge, and you're just trying to find all those little things that might separate you from the rest of the field. And so this is, I'd consider one of those little things that you can do to kind of help you and your partner out. JW and I like to, like you said, paddle tap pretty frequently, and it's just a form of positive reinforcement. Like, hey, you know, you missed that shot, but it's okay. I want you to keep going for it. That, you know, that was the correct shot. I'm with you on that. I'm ready for you to do that. So don't hesitate to do it, you know, in the next few points. And so having that positive reinforcement, knowing that your partner's not going to get upset for you going for a shot and missing, I think is really helpful. Some players respond differently though. Some players, I would say, don't need that positive reinforcement. They're kind of more independently motivated, I guess you could say. And regardless if they, you know, make or miss a shot, or if their partner gives them an eye roll or gives them a paddle tap, like whatever the outcome, they're going to keep, you know, doing whatever they think is going to give them the best shot of winning. Other players definitely kind of feed off their partner's energy, and when they see their partner get down, I would say everybody to some extent, when they see their partner get down, kind of brings the energy of the team down a little bit. And when they see that their partner's up or they're not upset, they're positive with you, then it's going to bring the energy of the team up a little bit. And for some people that effect is greater than it is for others. But I think in all cases, you know, having positive energy on the court is super helpful, and is one of those little things that will help separate you from the field.
I'm going to keep counting your paddle taps, because I think I mentioned to you before we got on that I've counted 3 before a serve, which again, I applaud. I think it's get to 7, it'd be amazing, but I'm going to keep counting. I'll let you know if I see more than 3, I'll let you know, hey, minute so-and-so. I got one more question before you. Then, 3 more questions, but one question about the game, and then I want to ask you a little bit about your play, which paddle you're using, and a little bit about. We have a friend in common in Kansas City, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I think I'd be remiss not to ask the question about facing tennis players, perhaps versus playing non-tennis players. Is there anything different when you're playing? Whether it's an Arnold or a Stocktrud or somebody like that, or you're playing against like an AJ Kohler who's a hockey background. Is there anything different that you're noticing in terms of the tennis players coming in and what they're bringing to the sport and having to adapt to that type of play?
Yeah, there are differences. I'd say the differences are more subtle in doubles than they are singles. You know, in singles, a tennis player can come in, a high level tennis player can come in and be competitive, you know, and pro pickleball singles, a little more easily than you can coming from any other like high level sports background. And so what the tennis players are doing a lot is and as the paddle technology is improving, players are able to generate a lot more spin on the ball. And so to begin with, you know, a few years ago, you couldn't come in and hit the pickleball the same way you could hit a tennis ball, because the pickleball didn't respond the same way that a tennis ball did to a tennis racket. Like you couldn't generate as much spin. You couldn't get as much reaction from the ball based off what you do to it, I think. But now, since the paddles have improved and the players are getting better, players are able to kind of do that more tennis-y swing with their paddle and you know, still keep the ball in, because before oftentimes it would go out, it was hard to control, but players, Connor Garnett's a really good example of someone that's coming in and getting a lot of spin on all of his shots, and he's got a two-handed backhand. A lot of the tennis players that are coming in, you know, will take their two-handed backhand that they had with them from tennis and use it in pickleball for doubles too. Like they'll have the two-handed backhand counter, the two-handed backhand drop. I think that's becoming a little more prevalent in the sport. I think players that don't have a two-handed backhand are trying to develop one right now. just because there's some advantages in certain situations to having one. And then in doubles, for the most part, everybody's technique is a little bit different, just because, maybe they came from tennis. I'd say you could definitely notice the difference between the technique of a tennis player versus a non-tennis player. But even tennis players have differences in techniques that, were different in tennis too. And so I think at the doubles, everything is a little more similar, just because, you eliminate that big backswing that you have in tennis. And obviously a lot of the play is at the kitchen line. So you really have to shorten everything up and make everything a little more compact. And so the technique is different, but everybody, I think, once they get to the kitchen line, is trying to do the same thing, which is kind of generate or develop a shorter, compact stroke with their paddle to keep it, simple, easy to replicate, so that they're more consistent. And then once you start the firefights, the quick exchanges at the net, then I think everybody is fairly similar. I know AJ Kohler, who you mentioned, has a hockey background. He kind of has a unique counter because he can get the paddle head straight up like here and just kind of slap it down like that. And that's something I think a lot of tennis players don't have, just because that's a little bit foreign to them. That's not a motion that they had to do in tennis a whole lot. I'm kind of similar in that sense. I don't do it quite as extreme as AJ, but close and similar in that regard. And so there are some subtle differences once you get up to the kitchen line, but for the most part, everybody's trying to do the same thing. And so it might look a little bit different, but the ball that's coming to you is the same off anybody's paddle.
It sounds like strategically at a fundamental level in doubles, the game is pretty similar. Maybe the tennis players have a different looking drive on the third or something like that. But other than that, I mean, once you get into the meat of the matter, it's the strokes will feel different, but fundamentally we're playing a similar game, which is
right.
Great for non-tennis players out there. You can know that you can play a really good pickleball game without ever developing a tennis stroke as part of your pickleball game. Let me ask you, I know you're playing with a Selkirk paddle, right? And which paddle are you using, and why do you like it?
Yeah, so right now I'm using the 002 paddle from Selkirk. I think Selkirk makes a lot of great paddles, and they're super, one of the innovators in our sport, I'd say, in terms of paddle technology. They're always working on something new, trying to come out with a new paddle, release a new paddle series. So they're keeping up with the paddle technology, which is something that I appreciate for sure. Right now, the paddle that they have out there that I like the best is the 002 paddle. And I was going back and forth between the Power Air paddle and the 002. And just recently, I think I've decided that I'm going to stick with the 002 paddle. It has a little more power. It's a little bit thicker, so it's a little bit easier to control on dinks and resets and drops, I think. The Power Air paddle was nice, though. It's a little bit thinner. It's a little more maneuverable in the air, so you can do a little more risky shots with it, which are higher risk, but at the same time, like if you can add something new or unique to your arsenal, that's helpful to use every once in a while. So I like the Power Air for that reason. I think I might stick with the Power Air for singles as well, just because for me, my ground stroke is a little bit better with that paddle than the 002. But yeah, Selkirk has lots of great paddles out there. I think the 002 and their Power Air personally are my favorites, and I think they're best ones that they have.
I'm gonna have to try out the 002 because I'm playing with the Power Air, but you sold me on the 002. I'm gonna get me one of them and check it out.
Yeah. And
then the last thing I wanted to touch base with you on is I know you're in Missouri. I know you're a senior at University of Missouri from what I've been told. So congratulations on continuing the work. But we have a friend that started in Missouri, the good folks at Chicken and Pickle, and we had the opportunity. The Better Pickleball team. We were in Dallas. We had the opportunity to check it out and play a little pickleball and get some. The food is amazing. The pickleball is great, but the food is phenomenal. And so my understanding is that folks might see you sometimes, but where?
Yeah, so at the downtown North Kansas City location, Chicken and Pickle, I'm there every once in a while. Or actually, more recently than that, I was actually at the Overland Park location in Kansas City. So I'll go up there and do some events there, or maybe just practice every once in a while. Dave Johnson, the owner of Chicken and Pickle, is also a Mizzou graduate, so we kind of had that connection. That's how we initially got connected. But yes, I agree with you. The food at Chicken and Pickle is amazing. If you're going to eat there, I highly recommend the pickled chicken sandwich. I get it every time. And then obviously they've got pickleball courts there that you can enjoy you're there.
Dylan, the only thing I'm gonna have to reach out to the folks at Chicken Pickle. They got to call it the Dylan Frazier, pickle chicken sandwich or something, right? I mean,
yeah.
And I'm looking forward to the Selkirk Dylan Frazier paddle. I'm gonna reach out to Mike and them and say, hey, where's the Dylan Frazier paddle? So I give you one of them. So awesome, Dylan. It was a pleasure chatting with you. Really appreciate. Love the way you carry yourself in the sport. Not just the way you play. You're an amazing player, but just you're such a positive influence for the sport. And I love what you're doing out there playing pickleball. Anytime you want to be on the podcast, you let us know. And good luck with the remainder of your college year and everything else on the tour. I'll be looking out for you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on, Tony.
It was a pleasure to interview Dylan for this podcast. His perspective, even though he's a young man, moving from 3.5 up to a top pro player gives a player a unique perspective in terms of how they relate to the sport, how he approaches the sport, and also the decision making, right? The types of shots that he thinks are important or knows are important given the way that he plays pickleball. As I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, and I'll repeat it here, is if you want to try one of the Selkirk paddles that you heard Dylan and I chatting about, there'll be a link in the show notes as well as a code that you can use at checkout. And if you haven't heard our podcast before, check out episode 162 again. It's published on October 20th. It has to do with a bowl of ice cream. I think you'll find it super helpful to you and your journey. And lastly, if you're hearing this before the holidays, we have our holiday gift guide. I'll put a link down in the description below. You can check that out there. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Dylan Frazier. And again, thank you, Dylan, for coming on to the Pickleball Therapy Podcast. And I'll see you in our next podcast.